This is a Bontrager Race. It's a lot like my Bontrager Privateer, but it was handmade in Santa Cruz, California. I was just bolting the other bar end on. I wanted some L-bends, but turns out they're pretty hard to find. I'm not sure what type these are even. Easton made these lightweight bars for Bontrager. They're the Race Light EA 70s, and they're really thin wall. They had some reinforcement plugs in here to keep them from getting crushed from the bar end clamp, but this one got pushed in a little bit, so I'd better be careful not to crash today. This bike is a little bit of a departure for me in that it's actually a size large, and I usually ride a medium in just about everything, but I've got Bontrager bikes in a medium, and I wanted to try a large. The more time I spend on my road bike, the more I feel like sometimes I belong on a bigger frame. It's hard to keep traction with all the loose fall leaves on the steep bits. I built this bike actually a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but I haven't ridden it too much because I typically ride my other Bontragers, which are size medium. This one's a large, and I got the idea to build it up partly because I found one that was a really good price, and I've always wanted a Bontrager Race, and partly because I had been riding a lot on my Bontragers, but also on my road bikes, and I felt like I might get a little bit more power in my pedal stroke if I was set back a little bit more behind the pedals and had a seat post that was set back a little bit. And Bontragers, I believe, come with 400mm seat posts with the clamp set in the center and a bolt on each side. And when I switched to a seat post that's set back a little bit, I found that on my size medium Bontrager Privateer and my Race Light, the seat post was at the perfect height when I could see the minimum insertion line right about here, which I'm sure is okay. I don't think the bike's gonna explode or anything, but it did kind of feel like I was possibly supposed to be on a slightly bigger size. I'm about 5'7", got about 32-inch inseam when I buy blue jeans, and I always thought medium was perfect. Of course, a smaller bike is a little bit lighter. It's gonna turn just a little bit easier, but you know, I thought I'd build up a large. But it does have the appropriate gussets at the seat tube, down tube junction above the bottom bracket, and on the chain stays you can just see the top of that one right there, as well as butterfly gusset right there below where the seat post collar goes, marking it as being a Bontrager Race. And the head tube doesn't have that external relief, so I'm pretty sure this is a Bontrager Race. So of around the mid-90s. It's in very good shape. I mean, honestly, the paint is better than probably any of my other Bontragers. As you can see, it's still got the stop for cantilever center pull brakes. It's got the signature Bontrager dropouts here. It does have the anti-chain suck device and I wanted to keep it as period correct as I could. The bike is probably, who knows, maybe a 95 or a 96, judging by the non-segmented chainstays. Although this is a race, so it could be older than that. I think the segmented chainstays were on the race lights. But it does have the appropriate gussets at the seat tube, down tube junction above the bottom bracket, and on the chainstays you can just see the top of that one right there, as well as butterfly gusset right there below where the seat post collar goes, marking it as being a Bontrager Race. And the head tube doesn't have that external relief, so I'm pretty sure this is a Bontrager Race. So of around the mid-90s. It's in very good shape. I mean, honestly, the paint is better than probably any of my other Bontragers. As you can see, it's still got the stop for cantilever center pull brakes. It's got the signature Bontrager dropouts here. It does have the anti-chain suck device. The components are pretty much straight up Shimano Dior XT, including a really minty set of, I want to say 1997 Shimano Dior XT cranks. The front and rear derailleurs, although this one should probably be one of the lower clamp derailleurs to work exactly right with where the cable stop is. It's kind of around the other side of the seat tube. The hubs might be a little bit older vintage of Shimano Dior XT, and I did lace these hubs up myself to some Mavic X317s. I bought a couple of these rims, and I've got them stashed in the garage. If I ever blow up this wheel, I can lace it to a new rim. We've got Shimano Dior XT V brakes, probably my favorite mountain bike brakes in the world, and Shimano Dior XT shifter brake lever combo to match. And the rear hub is a Shimano Dior XT hub laced to another X317. The tires are some old IRC Serac XCs that I've been sitting on in a pretty skinny now 1.95 diameter, and the headset is a 1-inch threadless FSA Orbit, so not a cartridge headset, but a good headset. Departures from all Bontrager stuff include the Control Tech stem in a shorter length than what you'd normally see on a size large. This one's probably 100 millimeters, and from the factory they would have come with probably 120. I know the mediums came with 110 millimeter stems, and then the bar ends are very similar to the original Bontrager bar ends, but I'm honestly not sure who made these. They're slightly longer than the actual Bontrager branded bar ends would have been. And then the seat post is a Spectre seat post because I wanted that more setback seat post, and that was, I believe, the house brand for Jamis branded products. The saddle is Selly San Marco Bontrager saddle. I want to say it's got chromoly rails, and as you can see, it's the Bontrager saddle with those cutaway rear corners in that shape. These are the calfskin leather Selly San Marco Bontrager saddles. And then I went with stainless king cages, since, I don't know, aluminum or carbon bottle cages just seems wrong on a beautiful steel bike. Whoever had this frame before me wrapped it this way with cloth, and I just left it like that. So if you watch this video and you wrapped your chainstay there to prevent chain slap, maybe this is your bike. And then the spec fork for these would have been a RockShox Judy XC, but this one has a Marzocchi Bomber from 2003, which is why it still works so well now in 2025, because those things are indestructible. I can take it faster than that. I just forgot to bring my body rig, and so I'm holding the camera with one hand and riding with the other hand. I just forgot to bring my body rig, and so I'm holding the camera with one hand and riding with the other hand. So the few times I've ridden this bike, I keep thinking to myself, have I been riding the wrong size Bontrager for the last 30 years? This trail's beautiful and it's not super aggressive, but I really do need two hands for a lot of it. I should be using two hands for all of it. I'll definitely bring my camera chest holder doodad next time. After I film a little bit, I'm gonna rip this trail at full speed without the camera out. You can see part of the dry creek bed here. Can't film any of the really fun stuff because I need both my hands. I guess I forgot to mention that the pedals are Shimano 520s. But if you saw them earlier, you probably figured that out. The grips are some $5 grips that I picked up on AliExpress. They're smooth on this side, and underneath they've got the grippy part, which is good. And here's a hill. So have I been riding the wrong size bike all these years? I don't have a selfie stick either, so I can't really get footage of me on the bike today. But I don't know, maybe I have been. I never felt like I was, and I like the maneuverability of a smaller bike, but with spending more time on road and gravel, the larger size frame feels pretty good. It's a little bit like, well, if you're my age, you might equate it to Gary Fisher's Genesis geometry. So, obviously on a bigger size frame, the top tube is a little bit longer, and the stem's a little bit shorter. That was how Gary Fisher had the Genesis geometry bike sorted out. The Marzocchi Bomber does change up the front end geometry a little bit, just by virtue of being a little bit taller than those RockShox Judy XC forks were. I don't know if it's a dilemma exactly. It is kind of weird having two different sizes of the same bike and not being able to decide exactly. But as long as I'm having fun with both of them, and it does sort of mean that I've got a spare bike in the garage for different height friends who might want to come and ride with me, and I can ride either size. Check out these minty Shimano Dior XT cranks. I mean, Dior XT was always just beautiful, like these older cranks where you could kind of see the grain in that cold forged metal. You can see that the chain rings hardly have any wear on them. Headed over to a different section of the park to head up a different trail. It's just so pretty this time of year. And here's the trail. Whew. That trail came around the opposite direction up to the top of this little hill here, and it's pretty steep, as you can tell from how I'm breathing. You know, I have a chromoly threadless Kelly stem that would look great on this. I was thinking about using, but right now it's on my brother's Le Monde. That one's 90 millimeters too, so might be a good fit on here. Or I could put a shim on the steer tube and put a 1 1/8 inch stem on here instead. I don't know. I try to avoid those types of things, quill stem adapters and shims and things like that, where I can avoid them, but I don't know. I'm starting to use shims on 1 inch steer tube forks kind of a lot for opening up some different options for stem lengths and easy access to lots of stems, as opposed to having to dig around and find a stem that fits a 1 inch steer tube. And obviously it's my bike, so I'm gonna say this, but doesn't the red just look fast? Even the skewers are Dior XT, but I don't know when it happened. Somehow this weird end cap got substituted in on this side. I didn't even remember that. Woo! What a great day for a ride. In 1997, I was working at Sun and Ski Sports Expo in Houston, Texas, and the Bontrager Race was the bike I wanted more than anything. And it took a while, but I do have both a race light and a race now. I rode Bontrager Privateers for years, and of course I still do. The Bontrager Race frame is made just a little bit differently than a Privateer and ends up being about half a pound lighter weight, as I'm told, compared to a comparable Privateer. But honestly, a Privateer is about 95% of the performance of a Bontrager Race, and they sold for about half the cost. Although these days, the prices are starting to inch up as they haven't been made in quite a while. And in some ways, that last year production of Bontrager Privateers is kind of the ultimate Bontrager mountain bike, because they had 1 1/8 inch steerer tubes. Not because Bontrager was wrong, because Keith Bontrager's right about everything, but because you do have a little bit more choice of what kind of fork you can bolt to the bike. You ever notice how these little Velcro seat bags, the straps tend to bounce loose when you go through some rough stuff? I like to attach something between the two straps, if you can, to make sure that doesn't happen, as you can see. So I felt a few raindrops, and it looks like my camera lens is starting to fog up a little bit. So I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna ride through the rest of this trail rather than trying to film anymore. But I hope you found this entertaining and at least a little bit informative. Or if you're nostalgic about Bontrager frames, maybe this was cool for you. Take care. I'll see you next time. Here comes that rain. Something I forgot to mention earlier, but I remembered as I was going down that very steep hill. The reason that these corners are cut away is that this is basically a Selly San Marco, I believe a Concours saddle, and Keith and his buddies for a while there would peel back the leather where it used to come out to about here, and they would just hacksaw off the corners. This was before dropper posts, so they could easily get their hips back behind the saddle on really steep technical descents. So Keith talked to Selly San Marco, and they started making the signature Bontrager saddles with the corners cut off. You can see the raindrops. These things are never over when they're over, are they? So, a few things I might get ripped for in the comments by the, well, I'll say by the maybe 3 people who watch this. Yes, I know that my helmet is old. It's a Giro Animus. I only wear it for riding off-road. I bought 2 of them when they were on clearance somewhere, and kept them stored in a cool, dry place. Didn't crash them significantly to where I would retire them. And this one's still in decent shape. I don't think it's UV degraded, crashed, or beat up enough to retire. And I like it a lot better than the newer shape helmets. But I mean, look at the bike that I'm riding. Another thing is, probably get ripped in the comments for having ridden my bike with one hand while I was holding the camera. And look, that's a fair criticism. I'll go ahead and say that any of that stuff where I was filming with one hand and hanging on with the other, I took that stuff at half speed. I'm honestly really careful at my age. I mean, you can see all the gray here. To not ride outside of my ability. And lastly, the bar ends. Yeah, I was using them on the climbs. Thanks for watching. That's right. You know my baby doesn't ride outside when it's raining.